Hey, Phil.
Hey, Senda.
You want to talk about cliches?
Oh, you mean like this opening?
Well, I mean, kind of, but isn't this more like a shtick? I think of it more like a shtick.
I guess it's pretty much more like a shtick. What's that thing I normally say? Oh,
Cue music.
And welcome to another episode of Panda's Talking Games. I'm one of your hosts who remembers to say his name in the intro, Phil.
And I am your other host who usually remembers anyway, Senda. And
yeah.
For tonight's topic, we have a note from GM Gerrymander on the forum who asked, when is a cliche too cliche and when is it a trope you should lean on? Cliches were original at one point and they're part of the culture, but I see a lot of players and GMs trying to avoid them. But at the same time, when are they appropriate? The untrustworthy Kender, excuse me, I take offense.
I would think all Kenders would actually take offense to that. Kenders don't think of themselves as untrustworthy.
They really don't.
If anything, Kenders are super loyal.
They're super helpful. I mean, if you drop stuff all over the place, they're just picking it up for you like you were just going to lose it anyway. Just saying.
Exactly.
Anyway, the cold calculating spy, even the damsel in distress. I'm going to say even the damsel in distress, like, wow, that is the most
Edit that. Quick edit.
Quick edit.
The damsel in distress is the most
cliche. Yes. When they show up, sometimes they are an eye roll. But if they never show up anymore, are they still cliche? And when is it okay to use them? So how do you use a cliche properly?
Yeah, good question, right? So tonight, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at cliches, and we're going to talk about when to use cliches and when not to use cliches.
Yeah, first, though, we have to kind of unpack what they are. So for that, we're going to have to lean onto one of our cliches, definition Panda. Or is it a bit? I feel like maybe it's a bit.
Bit, right?
Bit,
yeah, I know.
Cliche, shtick. I mean, I don't know. Is it overdone yet?
We're gonna get to that.
Let's define it.
Yeah,
and decide.
So we need to unpack a few terms for tonight, right? So let's start at the bottom, right, with trope. Right? A figurative or a metaphorical use of a word or expression, right? Like we've talked about tropes before.
Yeah.
Right?
So for example, you get like the hacker in a group of criminals on a heist, right? Like that's a trope.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, they can be really useful shortcuts because you don't have to explain everything about them.
Perfect, right? Shtick is a gimmick, a comic routine, a style of performance, etc. That is associated with a particular person. Or
show, right? Like, or thing, right? Like this can be the opening of our show.
Yeah, we have a lot of shticky things in this show.
Yeah.
And shticks are kind of like the same way with tropes, right? Shticks, the thing with shticks is that they make it feel familiar. Right. Because it's predictable. Like, because our show opens the same way, because we do the definition thing, like there are these, those shticks make people comfortable because they are reliable.
Right. And you do develop them in a game group even, right? Like we have shticks in my game group that are now like these running jokes that have been going on for months.
Sure.
Like we always quote, you tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it didn't even matter. Like that's just a thing that keeps coming up for us, but that's now a shtick, right? Linkin Park is a shtick for us.
That's very funny. So now let's get to the...
So, yes.
Let's get to the big boy. Cliche, right?
Yep.
A phrase or opinion that is overused and betrays a lack of original thought. Ouch.
Ouch, right? Yeah. It's when a shtick goes bad.
Or a trope goes sour.
It goes sour. You can only keep those on the shelf for so long, really. So it could be really kind of anything, right? So it could be like a pit trap with spikes in a dungeon. You know, it opens up the same way every time. Everybody knows about it.
So I'm just going to venture off the script for a second.
What?
So it's really interesting. Like I have this real aversion to cliches and stuff a lot of times because when I was a kid growing up, my dad and I would be watching TV and his word for cliche was hokey, right?
Right.
So we'd be watching something and he'd be like, that's hokey. That's whatever. And I would really like it. Like it would be so like we'd be watching the A-Team or something.
Right.
Right. And you know, the A-Team's like full of dumb cliches.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and so
yeah.
he would say those things and I would be like, oh, maybe I guess like you have to like do it differently or whatever. So like I used to have a lot of problems with cliches and like I kind of got over it, but I realized that like a lot of it came from my like wanting my dad's approval about like stuff I was creating and stories I was making and stuff.
That's
okay,
fair.
anyway.
Deep moment of introspection.
Deep moment of introspection happens on the show.
Yeah.
So things like tropes and shticks, as well as locations, objects, whatever, can all become cliche, right? They can turn into cliches. And one day a cool trope, the next day could just be cliche.
It's true. And the tricky thing about cliche like stuff is that it's somewhat subjective, right? Like who gets to decide what is overused versus what's original versus what's still a shtick versus what's still funny, all of that stuff, right? So the answer is that like there's different layers of sets of people who get to decide what they think about it, right? There's popular opinion, which is, the media, the internet, Twitter. Twitter may decide that something is cliche.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, right? Your peer group, your friends, the specific people that you follow on social media, etc. The gaming group that you play with, right? Even more specifically, right? Someday, maybe Linkin Park will be cliche for us, but today is not yet that day.
Right. And so this is where it gets more complicated, right? Because first of all, what one group thinks may not like what one group thinks is cliche may not be thought of as cliche by another group. So the internet might be cool with spiked pits in your dungeon, but your group might be like, oh, it's so cliche.
God, not another spiked pit. Right. And then the second part of this is there's no rules for something. Like, when does it become cliche? There's no expiration date printed on the story package. There's no set progression that you're like, you're a shtick for 6 months and then you're cliche, right? But like, if you think about like memes, like how long is it funny until it's cliche, right? Like they just expire. But sometimes and sometimes they last don't. Forever, right? So like there's no method by which we sort this out.
Right. And then third, there's no list of what's cliche and not. Like you can go to TV tropes and find tropes.
Yeah.
But there's no like there's no cliche.net or something where you could be like, is a spike trap cliche or not? Like it is the most subjective thing possible, yes. Right? It is literally just like somebody has to be like, oh, so cliche.
So cliche.
Right.
Yeah. So tonight, we're going to look at this in the following way. I'm going to look at when you could use them, right? And get away with it.
Right. And I'm going to look at when you shouldn't use them, right? Because there's no way we can pin down when something becomes a cliche. So we're simply like, they exist. We're just going to tell you when to use them and when not to use them. That sounds fair, right?
Yeah, I think that seems pretty fair.
Okay.
Right? Cool.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
right, do it.
So for using cliches, there are times when using a cliche is going to fit the game that you're playing, and sometimes they're even helpful because, like tropes, they are touchstones and they can convey a lot of information and they can be very genre enforcing, right? And sometimes you want or need that in your game. And, there are certain types of games that I tend to run a lot of where I'm like, cool, I genre enforce with cliches. I totally do. And it's fun because you play on them, right? So here's some ideas. So when you need to convey something quickly in a game and you don't want to expend a lot of words to describe it.
So, for instance, your sci-fi game has planets that are one biome.
Yep.
Right?
Boy, where did you get that from? Each planet is only one biome. The whole
this
thing.
This planet is all desert, and this planet is all
forest.
Winter.
Yeah.
Yes. That one's a moon.
Oh, you're right. It is a moon. But, Anyway, yeah. So you might also use them when you want the players to feel like they're in the genre. This is where you're being genre enforcing, right?
Right. Like, so the old man in the corner in the end gives you a quest.
Right. When you're like, I want the tone of this game to be like Dragonlance. And they're like, cool, You're eating spiced potatoes and there's a man in the corner. looking mysterious, right?
Seriously cliched, but totally digging it.
So cliched, but like, right? And that leads into, and this is where it usually comes up for me, is when the game doesn't take itself too seriously.
Right. So like if you're playing Paranoia and you go to research and development and you're asked to test the super weapon, like that bit of shtick is actually pretty cliche, but it's still damn funny.
Right. It's still key Paranoia paraphernalia, as it were. Right. And then when the game or genre is aware of itself, this is the other place that I tend to use it a lot.
Because this is a case where this is different from the one above it because it's not about being funny,
right?
But the genre is aware that it's like it's for instance,
meta. It's meta
in Passions de la Passiones. The gardener being revealed to be the twin of the heiress.
Oh yeah,
right.
But it's so good, and also genre enforcing, right? Because there's a reason these things are cliches. And then the other reason, like these are all the ones that I use things for, right, is also when you want a laugh or a lighthearted moment from the game. And sometimes that means genre enforcing because that's the genre you're in, right? But also...
Yeah, so like for instance, like everybody's getting their mounts to go out on the expedition, and the hulking barbarian gets like the really tiny...
Right. So like their feet are like dragging.
Yeah, or they're, all bunched up on it.
Right. And then the last one, and we're going to talk more about this in a bit, is it's also fun to specifically start to use a cliche when your purpose is to subvert it. But we'll come back to that a little bit more in your section, right? So in all of these cases, using the cliche enforces the game itself, the genre, and the setting, and can do it in meta ways or just by like enforcing the type of story that you're telling. And so when you use it like that, the cliche is actually a tool to help you be in the game. And it's a way that you can help set and maintain the tone of the game.
Yeah, so like if you use it sparingly, right, then they're like little in-jokes, like little moments that you smirk during the game, right? Like they may be like little nods to let players know, like, I'm aware of what's going on, like kind of things, right? Like little nods.
Like, I got that.
But if you use them like heavily, right, or really lean hard into a cliche, right now, like we're kind of setting a tone of like maybe this game's a little more slapstick.
Yeah, if you're like, cool, I'm just gonna jump into this inn situation. There's a hooded figure in the corner, and we can all have a little giggle as we get started on the game. That is different than like, and also you are playing a half elf, and are clearly torn about your life, and now we have a runaway elf woman who's in love with you. Like, then we start pushing some,
Yeah. Then when too many cliches pile up, right? When too many cliches pile up, or if we're really blatant about a cliche,
right?
What we're telling people,
this is a parody.
Yeah, exactly.
Like everything
so people
that
start treating it like a parody.
Everything that I just said is like I'm creating a parody of the original Dragonlance trilogy, right? Like, cool.
Right. And that's very tone, right? Like that helps set tone, right? Like if I'm playing a game with a bunch of people and I need to let them know what the tone of the game is, this is a way to do it, right? There's a difference between using a sparing one cliche just to get a little nod or a quick giggle versus like really piling it on and people being like, cool, I'm not taking anything in this game seriously. I get it.
Right. Yeah. Like the mage's eyeballs, the pupils have
hourglasses.
No, they're not even hourglasses. They're like stopwatches.
Right. Yeah. Now we're beyond cliche. We're straight into parody land. Yeah. All right.
It's a slippery slope.
So let's talk about when not to use cliches.
Yeah.
Right. So we mostly avoid cliches when we want something to be taken seriously or we're afraid of breaking immersion.
Right, which is, there's another part of this too, which is that people often strive to be completely and totally original, which is just one of those things that like, no one has ever been totally, completely original ever, right? So there are novel moments. But really what we're kind of doing is taking the same building blocks at some level, and maybe you have them more down to minutia, or maybe you're dealing with bigger ones, but whatever you're doing, you're taking building blocks that someone has probably already touched before, and you're just putting them in a different order. You're building a different thing out of them, right?
Yeah, and what we mean by this is like you make a conscious effort, like say you're doing Fantasy Town, right? So you make a conscious effort that everything's not a cliche, right? So you come up with like a really original name for the inn, and it's not a middle-aged like fat dude behind the counter. So you and you just keep like one after the other, they're purposely. Their
potatoes are really bland.
Yeah, they don't even have potatoes, right? Like they make something else, right?
Lutefisk.
Yeah, but you just it's that thing, right? Yeah. It's like where you're trying to be too original, so you've like removed every cliche and trope possible, and you're just doing like way too much work.
Yeah.
Right. Like go look at like any movie. Like go look at the cantina scene in Star Wars. It's a bar.
Yeah.
Right. They change one or two things to make it different, but the rest of it's a bar because guess what? We can all conceptualize bar.
Yeah, and then we don't need a lot more information than that to make that scene make sense.
Exactly. You're just doing so the bottom line is like don't not use cliches because you're trying to be 100% original. No one's 100% original.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to tone and immersion.
Yes.
So the thing with cliches is that cliches often create reactions in the player.
Right. Because they're funny, or you pick up on it, or you roll your eyes because that thing just happened again. Yeah.
Right. You could get snotty too, right? Like I used to be very elitist, right? So like if the GMs I was playing with like did something cliche in my head, I would be like, oh, like
so cliche.
So cliche.
Well, right? Or like, you might be on a podcast and the next thing you know, you're like rickrolling your whole audience. But like that's pretty cliche at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
So I bet a bunch of people eye rolled us.
Right. So here's the thing, right? So the thing is your brain loves patterns, right? We've talked about this before, right? Your brain loves pattern recognition. So much so that when it finds a cliche, it will match it to like the original thing, or it will match it to, here are all the other times this cliche's been used, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if we go back to the idea of layers, right?
Yep.
Of different layers, that kind of thinking is player level thinking, right?
Yes.
Like that happens in the player level, which means that for it to occur, your attention has been pulled out of the character level. So when you're like in character and you bump into one of these cliches and quietly in your head, you're like, oh, how many pit traps have I ever seen in my life? You are now out of the character level.
Can't believe there was another robed old man in the corner.
Exactly. So if you're playing a game where immersion is really important, right? Like being your character and staying in character kind of thing. Cliches are the kind of thing that can jostle you out of them.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to try to avoid them if that's your concern.
Yeah.
Right. And then there are some other places like types of games, types of scenes and stuff where you really want to try to avoid cliches because that breaking immersion is going to kind of ruin the tone or feel you're going for.
Yeah. So that would be things like heavy emotional scenes or somber scenes, or when you're trying to be scary, or pretty much a lot of those. Lots of times we talk about things and compare it to running horror where everyone has to buy in and really commit to that. So there are other situations that we treat the same way as playing horror, like when you are playing seriously for like romance or like those kind of things.
Yes.
Basically anything that has that kind of intensity that everybody has to kind of jump in and agree with.
Now, before the internet jumps on our case.
Yeah.
Going back to what we said before.
Yeah.
If you are playing heavy emotional scenes, somber scenes, or horror, scary kind of stuff, and you want to change the beat.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is where a cliche will work, right?
Can I tell you?
You can change the beat in other ways, but just so I don't want people to think like if you're doing heavy emotional scenes, you can't have any cliches. I'm talking about the actual scene of the heavy emotions. You can bracket it or have like, at the end of that scene, something kind of cliche come up as a thing that indicates like, oh, you know what?
Here's our
you should
release
all
moment.
Laugh now because we just came out of this heavy scene.
Yep. I had a really heavy scene playing across from a gentleman at my table. We were twins who had ended up on opposite sides of a superhero battle. and we had a really serious moment in conversation. And right as we came out of it, he looked at me dead in the eye and he said, "You tried so hard." And got so far. And I didn't even catch on until he said the second sentence, and then we all died, right?
Exactly. Because and that goes to beat structure and stuff like that, right? Sometimes we need that
you gotta have that
beat after a heavy scene to let those emotions out.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so the other time we want to avoid cliches is when the tone of the game is serious.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we talked about in your section that using cliches can indicate a game is the tone of the game is silly, or not to be taken seriously.
Yep.
Right. So if we're playing a game that's serious, we don't want to overuse our cliches because we may have injected too much comedy into the game. Right. So if we're playing like Knights Black Agents,
no sparkling vampires.
No sparkling vampires. No, I will drink your blood vampire, right?
Yep.
Like, don't do that.
No.
Don't do the count.
Nope.
Right? Like,
no.
Yeah, because you'll kill your tone.
Yes.
Right? And like, to be honest, if you kill your tone, at best, you've killed it for a scene. Moderately, you've killed it for a session. And worse,
tragically, yes,
you've damaged it so that the players always go to that joke.
Never come back. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you do find yourself about to use a cliche in a game that is serious tone or heavy content, there are a few things you can do to kind of like make it better.
Right.
Right. So the first one is like you can just file the serial numbers off of it.
Yeah. So this is something we've talked about before when we're talking about just using things from other media. It's like find the core of what that cliche is and then change the trappings so that it's just not as recognizable. Yeah.
Because as long as you can kind of obscure that pattern match.
Yeah.
Like you'll avoid triggering it.
Yes.
And the players will go on.
Yeah.
The next one is if you're going to use it, minimize it.
Right. So put it in a place that's not like super important to the main plot line. So if you have like a pair of minor NPC policemen and one of them is good cop and one of them is bad cop, or one of them is about to retire and one of them is the rookie, whatever it is. Right. They could show up, but maybe they're not the main NPCs for the session.
Yeah. Get them in, get them out.
Yeah. Get them in, make them do what they need to do, and get them out again.
Exactly. The next one is, and this goes back to what you were saying in your section, like the other thing you can do if you're about to use a cliche is go and subvert it.
Right, which is very specifically starting into the cliche to let the person start to pattern match and then change it, because then it breaks that pattern match thing, right? So like you're doing your sci-fi getaway chase, and instead of the hyperdrive failing, it goes into super overdrive, and then you have a new kind of problem. Can they get out of hyperdrive? And when they do, where are they going to be? Right?
Yes.
Like that's different. So subversion is one of those great like moments that you can just fake out your players without being a douche about it.
Yeah. In fact, it's great because for a moment they'll be like, "Oh, I bet the hyperdrive's going to break," and then you're like, and the hyperdrive goes to like warp 10.5.
Right.
And they're
They've
like,
gone
what?
Plaid.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing where it lures the players into thinking they know what's going on, only to throw a curve, but not in a crappy way. Like, by the way, this game is not actually about what you said it was going to be about, right? Like, it's an okay way to do it. Because this is a way that will actually raise tension and emotion because they have to think creatively to problem solve something they weren't expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So when we start talking about subverting cliches, it must be time to...
Wait. Are you going to say go long? Because if we subvert the cliche of our ending, then we would want to make the show go longer. But I have to edit this, so after last week's episode, which is really long.
All right. That one was my fault last week.
Yep.
All right. So let's not subvert it. let's lean into our cliche, our shtick. And when we start talking about subverting cliches, it must be time to end the show.
Indeed.
But first, I will tell you.
Oh, you still did it.
About another show on the Misdirected Mark Network. The Gnome Cast. Several gnomes from Gnome Stew get together to talk about gaming topics and themselves in an effort to entertain you and avoid being thrown in the stew. So, Santa, where can people find us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums where this topic came from. Or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they find us in one of those places, what can they do with that information?
Yeah, please send us topics. I get topics from a lot of places. We get them from the forums. I get people who now like find me on Slack and send them to me.
Twitter, but everywhere.
Twitter, yeah. Like, please just send us your topics. This show is like 98.5% fueled by your topics and questions. And we like it that way. Because if we sit around and do it, you're just going to get Ditch Lily trivia all night. Mm-hmm. So instead, we like to do the thing. We like to talk about the things that you find interesting. So please keep sending those topics. And if you like what we do here or elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider supporting our Patreon campaign. Go to patreon.com/MMP. Patrons get all sorts of things. Get the bonus outtakes from this show, which are pretty okie dokie. You get the after show from Misdirected Mark, access to the Slack room for life. You can come hang out and play Minecraft with us if block therapy is your kind of gig. We give out occasional things. We're due to give out something to our patrons.
You've been saying that for a while.
No, I know, but I also know we're kind of like in a holding pattern at Encoded right now. We're kind of taking like a little bit of a hiatus over the month of February, and now that we're heading into March, I'm like as the ground thaws and the new grass comes forth, I am wakening all the encoders to also get their shit going so that we can get some stuff made.
Spring.
So anyway,
wake up out of hibernation.
We do have a thing, and it is going to come to. It'll be fun, and we're gonna kick it out to our patrons. We also like to shout out to our patrons every week. We pick a few, even though we love you all every week. We like to make special shout outs to a few of you. This week, Jared Rasher, the scribe of MMP.
Thanks, Jared.
Zach Goins.
Thanks, Zach.
And Troy Pitchelman.
Thanks, Troy.
Send them. As part of our 2020 marketing campaign, the "If you listen to us, you will love us" campaign.
Give us fish that look like reviews.
There is a thing that we need in order to help get people who don't already know us and love us to listen to us and love us.
Yes, fish.
And that thing is a review, but it's in a very specific place. What is that place?
Well, you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help new people find the show. And on Apple Podcasts, you can review specific episodes if you really want to. So like if there's one that you really like go give us 5 stars on an episode. That's cool. But it does help new people find the show. And if you review it, we really, really love knowing about those reviews and reading them, because it's like giving a fish to a seal. Makes us very happy. See? Yeah, like that. Cool. So thank you so very much to everybody who already left a review. That we really, really appreciate it. Say, Phil, show me how you are going to deal with the cliches in your upcoming Headspace game.
Yeah, it's a cyberpunk game, so there's definitely some cliche material out there.
Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Show me what you got.
This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got, show me what you got. Show me what you got, show me what you got. Show me what you got, show me what you got. Show me what you got.
There's been some random humor ones that have been pretty good, and then I do have like a guilty pleasure. Like there is a type of video, like I watch them on Facebook too all the time, which is like any kind of woodworking. Yeah,
an interesting choice. I know. Hang on.
Yeah, so I have this thing about woodworking videos, like especially turning, lathes and stuff.
See it shaping.
Oh, like any of those things where like they make bowls or whatever. Like I watched this one, it was like just mindless this afternoon. That was somebody made this like, I don't know, it was like 8-layer wood table or something. Like they had like 8 different types of wood, glued it together, and then they like, they throw the lacquer over it and all that, sand it and all that stuff. It was like completely rad. I love that stuff. Like I will sit and watch woodworking videos. And let me be clear, I have zero woodworking talent, right? I don't own any woodworking gear. I've never done anything beyond middle school shop class, which was pretty, meager.
I know how to put a nail.
Oh, I can do that. And
through 2 pieces, that's about where I am.
Middle school shop class, like we made stuff, right? Like we made a sign for our house, and we made.
Having said that,
Yes.
I did have to work in the scene shop for a semester in college. So most of my knowledge of doing anything sort of handy comes from set building.
So is that just like, is it like just drill screws into stuff?
There's a lot of drill screws into stuff, but it also means weird things like I'm way more comfortable using a table saw than like anything that I hold in my hand.
That's interesting.
Like, right? Even though they're like really scary.
You would think that being the son of a Forged in Fire winner, like I might have any kind of remote talent like that, but that is not true.
But no. Boy, there was something funny we were talking about before we started recording, but then we talked about other things and I forgot.
Yeah, I did too. That's why I just like jumped into the TikTok thing really quick.
Yeah, what was it though? It was like, I mean, we were talking about Yoko Kanno and we were talking about Escaflowne, and that was the nasal.
Oh, I was doing that until your computer crashed. I was doing my own Escaflownes.
Escaflownes?
Yes, because Flonase is the actual drug. Right?
I know, but Escaflownes.
I was doing the symptoms list, and I was just making up like random symptoms.
Yeah. I spent a bunch of my evening like I was like plucking away at my harp, and then I was like, oh, this is a melody that I know, and then I figured it out and figured out like some of the chords that went with it, and then I was like, what the fuck song is this?
Did you Shazam it?
I actually SoundHounded it.
Yeah.
I actually went and re-downloaded SoundHound for the first time in like I don't know how many years because I could not find this fucking song to save my life. And then, because I thought it was Record of Lotus Wars, but it wasn't. Turns out it was Escaflowne, which is why we were talking about Escaflowne. Yoko Kanno, still a goddess. And I was just like, I cannot find this damn song. And then I found it on SoundHound, but like it didn't have any of the information in English. It was all in kanji, and I was like, how will I reproduce this information? And it was an interesting evening.
Nice. So tater tot waffles is like making fried rice, right? You can't use frozen tater tots. You have to have already cooked them, and then put them in the fridge.
And then put them in the thing.
Right.
Yeah. I learned that you can make meatballs with cold rice also.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of breadcrumbs. Right. So the chicken, like the sort of Mediterranean-esque chicken meatball recipe that I made on Monday is actually rice and chicken.
Oh, interesting.
And then like green onions and seasonings and stuff in there. And it's very good. And you plop them on some hummus and then you eat them. Ooh. I was like, oh, they're very good. Okay, making silly faces and working to make him come back. But I'm making really silly faces. You guys should see them. It's not working, though. Usually when I make myself look really stupid, that's when the video cuts back in. Bloop.
Okay, I'm back.
There we go. I was making funny faces and everything.
No, I'm pretty sure like you froze up. I finished my story, so when you edit this, you'll be able to grab the story. I need to put an ending on the story for a second. But that definitely looked like me. That message, like I was getting a connecting on my phone. All right, so give me 1 second. I'll put an ending on this, and then we should just jump into the episode.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, we gotta go. Like anyway, chicken katsu curry. That's a thing.
I know.
People
now
should
I'm
try
looking. I'm like yakitori breast. I'm like, I found a place near me that has something. Yakitori don. Mm-hmm. Ooh, Japanese style veggies and Boulder natural chicken served over rice. Yeah, katsu curry, choice of chicken or pork.
Boom. That's it. Just do that tomorrow.
Yep.
You're going to take it home because it'll be huge.
Yep.
But you will.
They also have katsu curry ramen.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. And I say that because the katsu's really crispy. Like I would not want to put it in my ramen and watch it get soggy. As it was, like the curry got it a little soggy, but it was still pretty crisp. Okay.
Yeah. Well, they have a lot of different ramens. Just
all right. So you should go to that place tomorrow.
Yeah. Shio ramen.
Okay. You ready to do this?
Yes. Good.
All right. Close that menu.
But it looks so tasty.
You will close that menu.
Wait, that was last week. I'm not even going to try to respond. Bloop. Anyway, so do you want to start the show?
I really do. Are you ready? Make the
Okay,
make
cool.
the meowing sound.
Meow. Meow. Bloop.
Do
Do.
do.
Good. Moving on. Bloop. Hacker, hacker, hacker. Hacker, hacker, hacker. Hacker, hacker, hacker. Hacker, hacker, hacker.
We're still gonna have a hacker.
Yeah.
Show me what you got.
Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Show me what you hack. Bloop.
All right, we should just say goodbye. Nice laugh.
No. Okay.
Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Where's my mouse? I found it.